The sands of Egypt hold more than monuments. They hold echoes, fragments of songs never fully sung in the canon of the West. Beneath the pyramids and the Sphinx lie forgotten words, lines on papyrus, whispers in temple chambers, remnants guarded in libraries long consumed by fire. These are the lost Egyptian texts that never reached the Bible, and their absence has left a silence in the scriptural imagination. Approaching this silence is not fantasy. It is recognizing that the Bible is a tapestry woven from countless traditions, Babylonian myths, Greek philosophies, Egyptian meditations on death and eternity. Yet not every thread survived. Some were lost, others deemed too dangerous. In these omissions, we glimpse an unseen architecture, like a collapsed temple whose columns hint at its former grandeur. Egyptian thought was not static. Texts such as the Pyramid Texts, Coffin Texts, and the Book of the Dead were maps of consciousness, guides for the soul's journey through unseen realms. Had fragments entered Hebrew and Christian scriptures, our spiritual vocabulary might be different. Death seen as migration, divine judgment as the weighing of the heart against a feather, an invitation to align with truth rather than fear it. Lost does not mean vanished. Scholars have preserved these writings, yet their living resonance in mainstream religion was silenced. Traces survive in biblical poetry, imagery of resurrection, and the visions of prophets with Egyptian inflections. These echoes remind us that sacred texts are doors into deeper corridors of human memory. Imagine a manuscript of a priestess at the temple of Isis, describing the soul as a radiant traveler, remembering its true name to pass through gates of light. Such voices did not enter the Bible, yet their longing for eternity echoes in Job and Paul. Differences in tone, wrath versus partnership with the cosmos, shaped civilization's understanding of sin, salvation, and death. Speaking of what was excluded is not to undermine what was preserved. The Bible reflects councils, scribes, and priests deciding orthodoxy. Egypt's wisdom was older, a library of metaphors for the soul's journey long before Moses. What might emerge if John's "In the beginning was the Word" were read alongside Egyptian hymns to Thoth, or the psalmist's "The Lord is my shepherd" echoed with Osiris, the shepherd king of the dead. These comparisons reveal a subterranean river of human attempts to voice the unspeakable. The lost Egyptian texts offer a different perception of the cosmos: stars as beings, death as transformation, Ma'at as a principle even the gods obey. Had these concepts reached the Bible, our relationship with nature, justice, and the divine might favor balance over dominion, harmony over fear. Morality would emerge from alignment with cosmic order rather than command. This exploration matters beyond history. In times of ecological crisis, spiritual fragmentation, and uncertainty, the texts remind us that humanity has always wrestled with mortality, sought truth, and longed to cross the visible-invisible boundary. Their voices, once silenced, can now restore imagination and insight, teaching us a civilization that saw no division between science and spirit, law and myth, temple and cosmos. We cannot resurrect the past fully, but we can learn from fragments. Each papyrus, each glyph, is a shard of a broken mirror reflecting the eternal. Piecing them together shows that our stories are larger than any canon, the soul's journey older than scripture. Truth emerges through many windows, not a single tradition. Our journey begins at this threshold of silence. Exploring the lost Egyptian texts is not rewriting scripture, but hearing the fuller symphony in which the Bible is one movement. The truth of Egypt was never entirely lost. It waits, half buried by desert storms, ready for those patient enough to look upward and courageous enough to look inward. If the introduction opened the doorway, here we now step inside the chamber itself, where light filters through cracks in the stone and reveals inscriptions that seem at once familiar and utterly strange. The lost Egyptian texts are not simply ancient curiosities, they are architectures of thought. They give form to the invisible, laying out principles that guided how the Egyptians understood existence. To approach these principles is to touch the roots of human consciousness before it was divided into the separate religions we know today. In their core themes, one begins to glimpse why these texts did not fully enter the biblical canon, for they speak with a language too vast to be easily contained. One of the central themes is the principle of Ma'at. More than a goddess, more than a word, Ma'at was the thread that bound the cosmos together. It represented truth, balance, justice, and harmony, the very fabric of reality. To live in Ma'at was not merely to obey laws, it was to align oneself with the rhythm of the universe. Kings justified their reign by claiming to uphold Ma'at, and ordinary people prayed that their hearts would be light with Ma'at in the afterlife. When the heart was weighed against her feather, it was not an arbitrary judgment, but the measure of one's resonance with cosmic truth. This vision of morality, founded on harmony rather than command, stands in contrast to the later biblical emphasis on obedience. The Egyptians also saw death not as an end, but as a passage. Texts such as the Book of the Dead and the Coffin Texts served as guidebooks for the afterlife, filled with incantations, passwords, and rituals to ensure the soul's safe passage. These writings reframed existence itself as preparation for a great journey, where wisdom and virtue mattered more than possessions. If this perspective had been absorbed into biblical tradition, perhaps death in the Western imagination would carry less fear of finality and more reverence as a voyage of transformation. Another powerful theme is divine multiplicity. Egyptian theology was neither rigid monotheism nor chaotic polytheism, but a living symphony of deities. Ra renewed the sun each day, Osiris embodied resurrection, and Isis gathered the broken into wholeness. To the Egyptian mind, these were not competing gods, but archetypes, expressions of life's many dimensions. They were metaphors that pointed to the inexhaustible richness of the divine. Had this vision been more fully integrated into the Bible, Western theology might have grown more fluid and inclusive, less bound to exclusivity and more attuned to diversity as a reflection of unity. Language itself was sacred. Words were not symbols, but forces woven into the fabric of creation. To name was to summon, to write was to preserve, to speak in ritual was to bind reality into order. Incantations were preserved with precision because forgetting a word meant losing a passageway in the afterlife. Here, language was power, echoing in its own way the biblical declaration that, in the beginning, was the Word. Both traditions recognized that speech is not an echo of reality, but its foundation. Equally vital was the Egyptian reverence for cycles, the sun's daily death and rebirth, the flooding of the Nile, the endless rhythm of seasons, all mirrored the soul's journey. Osiris was not merely a mythic figure, but a pattern of renewal seen in crops, in stars, in human resilience. Where biblical thought leaned toward linear time, creation, fall, redemption, the Egyptian worldview revolved in circles, whispering that endings are only hidden beginnings. Underlying all these themes is a profound image of humanity as participant rather than passive subject. Through Ma'at, Through knowledge, through courage in death, the soul could ascend. The Bible often emphasized humanity's fallenness and need for mercy. The Egyptian texts spoke of capacity and preparation, of collaboration with the divine order. In one vision, humans await rescue. In the other, they navigate eternity with tools entrusted to them. Taken together, these concepts reveal a majestic yet practical worldview. Truth as balance, death as transformation, divinity as manifold, words as living powers, time as cyclical, and humanity as capable traveler. They did not enter the biblical canon not because they lacked depth, but because they overflowed the vessel of any single tradition. To recover them now is to rediscover a forgotten mirror, one that widens our sense of what it means to live, to die, and to belong to the cosmos. If the themes of Egypt's forgotten writings provide the framework, their symbolic narratives breathe life into the architecture. These stories were never mere entertainment or history. They were myths and parables cast in the language of gods and stars to express truths too vast for plain speech. To step into them is to enter a hall of mirrors, where each reflection reveals something about Egypt and about ourselves. The tale of Osiris remains the most resonant. Osiris was not just a king who died and rose again, but a symbol of the human spirit, shattered, scattered, yet restored through devotion. His brother, Set, embodiment of chaos, tore him into pieces and spread them across the land. Isis, his consort, searched, gathered and bound him back together until life could return. His resurrection was not about power over death, but love and memory overcoming fragmentation. The myth speaks to every soul that has felt broken and yet hopes to be made whole, not by erasing wounds, but by weaving them into a new wholeness. Had this myth been absorbed into biblical tradition, resurrection might have been seen less as a single event at the end of time and more as a daily process, a constant gathering of fragments, a continual remembering of self. In this way, Osiris offers not a story of gods alone, but a pattern of human healing, echoed in psychology, art, and recovery from despair. Another great cycle appears in the journey of Ra, the sun god. Each day he sails across the sky, radiant and strong, and each night he descends into the underworld, facing serpents and the dragon Apophis, who would consume him. Only through that struggle does he rise renewed each dawn. Here lies the truth that light cannot avoid darkness, it must pass through it. The Egyptians saw in Ra's voyage the path of every soul. We rise, we decline, we enter shadows that threaten us, and we emerge renewed. This vision shifts the meaning of struggle. Where the Bible often frames darkness as punishment, the Egyptians saw it as necessity. Night was not the opposite of day, but its womb. Suffering was the forge of renewal. If this had been central in biblical thought, perhaps depression would be seen as a night-sea journey, failure as the shadow that makes dawn possible. This vision shifts the meaning of struggle. Where the Bible often frames darkness as punishment, the Egyptians saw it as necessity. Night was not the opposite of day, but its womb. Suffering was the forge of renewal. If this had been central in biblical thought, perhaps depression would be seen as a night-sea journey, failure as the shadow that makes dawn possible. The narratives also gave voice to the soul itself. In the Coffin Texts and Book of the Dead, the deceased speaks. I am the falcon, I am the lotus, I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow. These are not poetic flourishes, but affirmations of identity, reminders that the soul is not mere dust, but eternal participant in creation. In these metaphors, the traveler becomes falcon, lotus, star, never confined to one form, always part of the infinite. The Bible often casts the human voice in humility or lament, "I am dust and ashes." By contrast, the Egyptian voice was cosmic, unapologetic in affirming dignity. It was not arrogance, but recognition of divinity within. To integrate this perspective would balance humility with empowerment, reminding us that transformation is our destiny. The image of Ma'at scales is equally profound. In the afterlife, the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. A heavy heart, burdened by cruelty or falsehood, is devoured by Amit, while a light one enters eternal peace. The story is less about external judgment than the weight we carry in life. Resentment and dishonesty make the heart heavy. Kindness and clarity make it light. The verdict is not imposed but revealed. Imagine if this had been central to the Bible. Morality understood not as appeasing divine wrath, but as cultivating a heart light enough to soar. Responsibility would be inward, a matter of harmony, not fear. Ethics would become an art, the crafting of a soul aligned with truth. Creation myths, too, offered symbolic depth. Out of none, the primordial waters, rose the first mound of earth, from which gods brought order out of chaos. Existence, they taught, always arises from formlessness. Every new beginning in life echoes this cosmic birth. From confusion, ground emerges. From disorder, meaning takes shape. Here chaos is not to be feared but embraced as fertile ground for creation. These symbolic narratives are not relics, but mirrors of human experience. They remind us that we are Osiris reassembled, Ra passing through night, a heart balanced on the scales, a lotus rising from the waters. Though excluded from the biblical canon, they still whisper across time, teaching that myth is not fantasy, but the architecture of the soul's truth. Studying Egypt's lost writings as myth or philosophy is one thing. Allowing their wisdom to shape daily life is another. These texts were never meant to remain confined to tombs or scrolls. They were living guides for the soul. Integrating them today means grasping their symbolic essence and letting it illuminate modern existence. The principle of Ma'at offers a first lesson. Truth and justice are not merely law or reward, but harmony in living. To walk in Ma'at is to align one's inner world with outer reality, acting in ways that do not create imbalance. In daily life, this could mean treating others with fairness, speaking words that heal, and maintaining equilibrium within oneself. Ma'at becomes a compass of inner balance, fostering clarity and grounded living. The Egyptian view of death as transformation carries practical power. Modern cultures often approach death with fear, seeing it as an end or uncertain judgment. The Egyptian texts invite us to approach death and life's endings as passages. Remembering one's true name or affirming divine identity was symbolic preparation for eternity. Today, this can translate into meditation, journaling, reflection, or prayer. A conscious engagement with who we truly are beneath possessions, roles, and passing concerns. Such practices prepare us for life's smaller deaths, losses, changes, and endings that ask us to release and renew. Cycles are central to Egyptian thought. Time is circular. Endings are beginnings. Practically, this means embracing rest without guilt, seeing failure as a prelude to growth, and understanding that healing is cyclical. Relationships may fracture and heal. Creative projects may lie dormant and then bloom again. Living in cycles releases the pressure of perfection and invites renewal. Language was sacred to the Egyptians. Words were bridges connecting the visible and invisible, shaping reality itself. Today, conscious speech, truthful, kind, intentional, participates in creation and fosters balance in our interactions. The story of Osiris illustrates the practice of gathering fragments. Modern life scatters us across obligations, screens, and memories. Following Isa's example means recollecting oneself, reconnecting with the body, neglected passions, or hidden aspects of the psyche. This may take art, therapy, solitude, or spiritual practice, but the act of integration restores wholeness, not by erasing brokenness, but by weaving it into a living whole. Ra's nightly descent into the underworld becomes a metaphor for facing challenges rather than avoiding them. Darkness is a passageway, not an enemy. Practically, this means confronting difficult conversations, inner shadows, or grief. Dawn comes not by bypassing night, but by traveling through it. Courage to descend is the secret of renewal. The weighing of the heart offers another guide, asking, "Is my heart lighter than it was this morning?" cultivates ma'at in daily life. Lightness arises not from escapism but integrity, speaking truth, acting with kindness, and carrying clarity. This shifts morality from fear of judgment to the joy of balance. These practices shape how we relate to death, time, truth, others, and ourselves. Ancient wisdom proves perennial. The questions Egyptians faced, how to live in balance, prepare for death, renew oneself, and speak words that build, are the same we face today. By reclaiming these principles, we see daily life as a reflection of eternal patterns. What was etched in tomb walls can still be etched in our choices. What was sung to the gods can still echo in our hearts. We have journeyed from the threshold of forgotten words into the chambers where Egypt's wisdom still breathes. We traced its themes of Mayat, death as transformation, divine multiplicity, sacred language, and cycles of renewal. We have listened to symbolic narratives, the resurrection of Osiris, Ra's nightly voyage, the weighing of the heart, the rising lotus from primordial waters, and seen how these patterns can guide our own lives in truth, balance, courage, and healing. Why does this matter now? Because truth is too vast for any one canon, too radiant to be contained in a single tradition. The omission of Egypt's wisdom from the biblical record is not a historical failure, but an invitation to complete the conversation, to bring back voices that were silenced, not as rivals, but as companions. The Bible itself shines more fully when read alongside them. Resurrection resounds more deeply with Osiris, creation's poetry with Nun, and truth is clarified through the feather of Ma'at. The call of these texts is not to abandon faith or indulge nostalgia, but to awaken to the unity behind all human attempts to understand the sacred. Egypt shows that morality is balance, language is creative, death is passage, and the soul is radiant. These are not doctrines, but postures of being. To live them is to walk as one who remembers. Practically, we are invited to cultivate light hearts, gather our fragments as Isis gathered Osiris, face our nights as Ra faced his serpents, honor our cycles, and treat words as sacred. Every act, speaking with intention, pausing in chaos, holding grief as a path to renewal, is a way to embody these truths. The lost Egyptian texts live when we live them. They awaken when we awaken to their presence. Each of us is a traveler with a story still unrolled, our choices inscribing the hieroglyphs of our lives. To embody Mayat in harmony, Osiris in renewal, Ra in courage, the lotus in perpetual rising, and the sacred word in speech that builds, is to bring these texts to life, not in tombs, but in living hearts. The invitation of Egypt is clear. The soul is not bound by dust, truth is lighter than fear, and the universe is a temple waiting for reverent passage. The Bible is one pillar, but others are equally ancient and luminous. To honor them all is to step into greater light. The question is not whether these texts were lost, but whether we are ready to be found by them. Let us carry them forward, weaving them into the tapestry of human wisdom, so our hearts may be lighter than the feather of Ma'at. As we step back from the sands of Egypt and the echoes of texts long buried, we are reminded that wisdom is never truly lost. It waits in silence until someone dares to listen. If these truths stirred something within you, let that spark grow. Support this journey by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and turning on notifications so that you never miss the next step into hidden knowledge. Share your thoughts in the comments below, for every reflection helps weave this ancient tapestry back into life. Together we can awaken the forgotten voices of the past and carry their light into the future. Thank you for watching.